You enjoy your time here and find peace in the stories we tell. If you liked the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. In the blood-drenched shadows of those glorious years, where the air reeked of steel and slaughter, I stood as an assassin at the very pinnacle. I came and went like a ghost. No one ever knew, no one ever noticed. But even the longest road eventually wears you down, and a heart steeped in carnage finally thirsts for a sliver of peace. To escape the relentless blades of my enemies, I slipped into the Marquis's household, taking on the role of a personal maid to the young miss, so I could live out my days in quiet obscurity. The Marquise and the Madame were kind-hearted souls who treated their servants like family. The entire estate breathed with harmony and warmth. As for the young miss herself, she was pure as plum blossoms in winter, innocent, carefree, her laughter bright enough to chase away the grayest rainy days. I had truly believed this place would be my final haven. I even dreamed of laying down my sword for good, of quietly accompanying the young miss until she married and I could settle into the humble life of a loyal maid at her side. But life never unfolds as we wish. An imperial decree descended from the palace like a razor-sharp blade, slicing my fragile dream of peace to ribbons. The young miss was to be married off to Pei Xiao, heir to the Prince of Pingnan, a man whose reputation for debauchery and cruelty had already spread like poison across the capital. Dark tales swirled around his residence. Maids of even modest beauty were said to be tormented until they were nothing but broken shells, their muffled sobs echoing unheard through the halls. The news struck like thunder. The entire Marquis's estate plunged into a suffocating gloom. The Marquis sighed in silence, each breath heavy enough to crush a heart. Overnight, his hair turned as white as winter snow. The Madame and the young miss clung to each other, weeping until their tears ran like rivers, enough to soften even stone. I stood there watching that heartbreaking scene, feeling like an outsider who could do nothing but let out a helpless sigh. Then I stepped forward, calm and resolute, beneath their stunned and bewildered gazes. I spoke without a trace of hesitation. "Let me go in the young miss's place." The moment the words left my lips, all three of them froze. The young miss shook her head frantically, eyes brimming with tears, her voice choked with sobs. "Lu Yun, don't talk nonsense. You don't understand at all. The Prince of Pingnan has nursed a grudge against my father for years because father dared to submit a memorial impeaching him for abusing his power. He claims father doesn't know how to raise a proper daughter. Our two houses have been like oil and water for ages, there's no reconciling them. And that heir, Pei Xiao, he's a vicious, dissolute monster. Every maid with even a hint of beauty in his household ends up ruined beyond recognition. The Prince of Pingnan's residence is nothing but a pit of hellfire. How could I possibly push you into that abyss just to spare myself?" Her sorrowful words only deepened the Marquis's guilt. The Madame hugged the sobbing young miss tighter, her own eyes red and swollen as she turned to scold her husband. "This is all your fault. That scoundrel Pei Xiao is ruthless. He wouldn't hesitate to destroy you. What business did you have submitting that memorial? Now look what you've done. You've offended the Prince of Pingnan and dragged our daughter into this nightmare." The Marquis could only sigh, his eyes dull with despair, unable to utter a single word. I smiled faintly to myself. They thought I didn't understand. In truth, an outsider like me saw the whole tangled web more clearly than anyone. Pei Xiao was the sole son of the Prince of Pingnan and his consort. Born late in their lives, he had been spoiled rotten, indulged to the point of lawlessness. He grew into a cruel, arrogant tyrant who abused his power and trampled anyone who crossed him. If he hated someone, he didn't stop at words. He used whips and rods until servants died under his hand every single year. His insatiable lust was infamous. The residence was filled with private chambers for his pleasures, yet no woman ever left unscathed. Many of those he tormented chose suicide just to escape. The prince and his consort covered up every atrocity, so even those who burned with outrage dared not speak out. Just a month ago, while returning to the estate, the Marquis had personally witnessed Pei Xiao and his thugs drag a bean, curd seller's daughter into a dark alley and violate her to death. Rage had boiled over. The very next day, the Marquis submitted another memorial denouncing the crimes of both the prince and his heir before the entire court. The scandal shook the capital. The emperor flew into a fury, stripping the Prince of Pingnan of a year's stipend and sentencing Pei Xiao to 50 lashes as a warning. The Marquis thought the matter had ended there. Who could have guessed that yesterday an imperial marriage decree would suddenly arrive from the palace, claiming it was meant to mend the rift between the two families. Everyone knew the truth, this was the Prince of Pingnan's open act of revenge. Once the decree was issued, no matter how heartbroken they felt, no one could defy it. Defiance meant extermination of the entire clan. The young miss sat in stunned despair, her tears finally running dry, her voice fading to a whisper. If there truly is no escape, then I will go to Jingson Convent, shave my head, and become a nun. I will spend the rest of my life with oil lamps and sutras as my only companions. The madam panicked and tried to comfort her, but before she could speak, a young servant burst in, face pale with alarm, voice trembling. Marquise, madam, the heir of the Prince of Pingnan has arrived at the gate to present the betrothal gifts. The words had barely left his lips when a flood of people surged through the doors like a tidal wave. At their head strode a man in lavish brocade robes worn loose and careless, his posture arrogant and lazy, as if he feared neither heaven nor earth. His face was handsome, yet his eyes were dark and bottomless, gleaming with a cruelty that made one shiver without even being touched. That was Pei Xiao, heir to the Prince of Pingnan. The Marquise greeted him with forced courtesy. Your Highness the heir, I trust your father is in good health. Pei Xiao curled his lips into a mocking smile and offered the barest, most dismissive salute. His voice drifted like a breeze, yet it carried open contempt. His gaze swept the room like a blade, every glance dripping with vile calculation. The young miss paled in terror, trembling violently, and instinctively hid behind me as if seeking shelter. I remained perfectly calm. With a subtle glance, I signaled the nearby maids to escort the young miss safely into the inner hall. As I turned quietly to face him, the Marquise demanded, "What brings you here?" His voice low and icy, his face clouded with black fury. The air in the room grew thick and stifling. Pei Xiao, far from intimidated, threw his head back and laughed. A loud, scornful sound that set everyone's teeth on edge. I naturally came to meet my future princess consort. They say she possesses breathtaking beauty, a graceful figure, and a charm that rivals even the top courtesan of Zuian Tower. I simply couldn't wait. I had to come see her first and sample a taste to set my mind at ease. That lewd taunt struck like a poisoned arrow, humiliating and belittling everyone at once. Not only the young miss but the Marquise and Madame looked as if their hearts had been torn apart. You are going too far." The Marquise shook with rage, pointing a trembling finger at Pei Xiao's face yet unable to form another word. The Madame's face drained of color, she swayed as if she might collapse. I stepped forward at once, steadying her with a gentle hand on her back. "Mother, please don't be angry. It will only harm your health." The moment my words fell, Pei Xiao's gaze locked onto me. He narrowed his eyes, sneering lazily, his tone laced with scrutiny. "So you are Song Yun." Pei Xiao's lip curled in disdain as his eyes raked over me like I was a cheap trinket. "Nothing remarkable about your looks, and your figure is frail and thin. Probably not even as good as the lowest scrubbing maid in Zuian Tower." His followers burst into loud, lecherous laughter that filled the room. Their gazes sliced across my body like knives, eager to see me crumble in shame and panic. I kept my expression perfectly serene, merely curving my lips in a faint, indifferent smile. If the heir finds me unworthy, perhaps he should petition His Majesty to retract the decree and cancel the marriage. For the peace of mind of both families. Pei Xiao paused, momentarily stunned, then let out a cold laugh, his words dripping with mockery. "You certainly have a sharp tongue," I replied without hesitation. "You flatter me, Your Highness. I merely learned a little from you." My unflappable calm seemed to spark his interest. He leaned closer, eyes flashing with wicked amusement, his voice dropping low. "I hope that on our wedding night, you still keep that clever mouth of yours. Don't disappoint me." He paused, his grin turning even more sinister. "Oh, and I almost forgot. I have a few sworn brothers outside who have never known the touch of a woman in their lives. Unfortunately, their bodies aren't exactly intact, and they're covered in sores that reek so badly it turns the stomach." He chuckled. "As the saying goes, brothers are like hands and feet, women are like clothing. Since you'll be my new clothes, why not let my brothers try you on as well? Consider it repayment for the kind instruction your esteemed father gave me back then." He finished with a booming laugh, staring straight at the Marquise with open provocation. Every word cut like a blade. Of course, the Marquise could still choose to cancel the marriage. But I doubt our entire household could bear the price. With that, he spun on his heel and strode out arrogantly, his lackeys trailing behind like shadows, leaving the room thick with stifling tension. "Beast." The Marquis stared after his retreating figure, shaking with fury, the word ripping from his throat in raw indignation. The madam buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. Heaven help my poor daughter. I stood there, feeling my own body tremble, not from fear, but from excitement. How long had it been since I'd encountered a scoundrel quite this vile? In the end, I still took the young Miss's place, stepping into the bridal sedan and becoming the new bride of the Prince of Pingnan's household. The young Miss doesn't want this. She had cried until she had no tears left, unable to bear sending me into what everyone knew was a living hell. But before the bridal procession arrived, I had quietly knocked her unconscious, dressed myself in the magnificent wedding robes, and walked out into the courtyard with firm, unwavering steps, never once looking back. All these years, the young Miss had treated me like her own sister. She was so kind and pure that she wouldn't even step on an ant. How could I stand by and watch her be thrown into the flames? The Marquise and Madame were choked with emotion, their eyes filled with unending guilt and remorse. The Marquise personally opened the ancestral hall, took up the brush, and recorded my name in the family genealogy, officially naming me the second young Miss of the Song household. From that moment on, Lu Yun ceased to exist, only Song Yun, daughter of the Marquise, remained. The madam handed over every dowry item she had prepared for her own daughter over the years, entrusting it all to me. Before I climbed into the sedan, she hugged me tightly and wept, each word carving into my heart. You are the benefactor of this entire household. You saved our daughter. No matter your origins, you are the daughter I love most in this world. The Marquis stood before the bridal procession, his voice ringing out, each word striking the ground like iron. Yun is my daughter. If any harm comes to her, Song Zhao swears he will storm the Golden Throne Hall itself to demand justice. It was a solemn vow, a clear declaration that the Marquis's household would not sit idle if anything happened to me. Yet to everyone else, it only sounded more tragic, because they all believed this journey of mine was one from which I would never return. Pei Xiao still wore that mocking smirk, as if the whole affair were nothing but a farce. In his eyes, the Marquis's words were no more than wind. The news of the Marquis marrying off his daughter, and the prince's residence welcoming a bride spread through the capital like a tidal wave. From commoners to noble families, everyone whispered and waited eagerly for the spectacle to unfold. Inside the bridal chamber, dragon and phoenix candles burned bright, bathing the room in vivid red that felt almost suffocating. Laughter and chatter drifted in from outside without end, yet within these walls the air was as cold as ice. I sat quietly, waiting for Pei Xiao to appear. Young Miss, are you hungry? Shall this servant fetch some snacks to tide you over? Kui Yun, the maid who had followed me from the Marquis's estate, spoke softly. Her voice trembled, each word catching in her throat. She was clearly so tense she could barely stand. Before I left, the madam had told me Kui Yun had learned a few basic martial skills from the household guards and had chosen her to accompany me for protection. But looking at her young, still, childlike face, I could only sigh inwardly. A little maid like her stepping into the Prince of Pingnan's residence was no different from walking straight into a tiger's jaws. I was about to open my mouth to comfort her when the chamber doors were suddenly kicked open, with a thunderous crash that shook the entire room. Ki Yun jumped in fright, trembling all over, yet she still instinctively moved to shield me, her eyes wide with panic. I frowned slightly and looked toward the entrance. Beneath the blazing red candlelight, Pei Xiao strode in, the crimson wedding robes only accentuating his wild arrogance. He advanced slowly, his gaze full of contempt and ridicule, to leave the eldest young miss of the Song family waiting alone in the bridal chamber. Truly, this heir has committed a grave sin. His voice was cold, dripping with undisguised mockery. Kui Yun still stood between us, but before she could react he shoved her roughly to the floor. A lowly maid dares block this heir's path. How reckless. Kui Yun fell hard, her face deathly pale with terror. I merely glanced at her lightly, signaling her not to move. Pei Xiao continued forward, his eyes like those of a vicious wolf. He reached out and gripped my chin with brutal force, letting me feel the cruelty hidden behind his cold smile. That old fool Song Zhao actually dared to impeach the Prince of Pingnan's household before the emperor. He must have lived long enough. Isn't he always priding himself on being upright and just? Doesn't he claim to love his daughter more than anything? If the entire capital witnesses his beloved daughter being defiled by two beggars on her wedding night, I wonder if Song Zhao will still have the face to hold his head high or call himself honorable and incorruptible. The moment he finished speaking, two figures stepped through the door, two beggars in tattered rags, filthy from head to toe, their faces smeared with layers of grime. They stared at me with lecherous, predatory eyes. Pei Xiao laughed coldly and waved a hand. "She's yours. Enjoy yourselves." The two beggars immediately grinned obsequiously, their voices both servile and revolting. One said, "Rest assured, Your Highness, we brothers have plenty of tricks to make any woman submit." The other chimed in, smirking with even greater delight. "Exactly. No matter how noble a woman is, she's still just a toy in our hands. What's so special about the daughter of a high official?" The ones before her all ended up obediently lowering their heads, didn't they? Pei Xiao nodded in satisfaction, looking at me with fake pity. His voice was light as a breeze yet carried venom straight to the bone. "In an hour, this heir will invite all the honored guests to watch a truly spectacular show. After tonight, the Song household will become the laughingstock of the entire capital." With that, he flicked his sleeve and strolled out leisurely, as if it were all just casual entertainment. Two guards dragged Kui Yun away on his orders. She struggled wildly, her panicked screams echoing through the silent space. "Young miss, run. Go find the marquise." The doors slammed shut. Pei Xiao had even carefully locked them from the outside, leaving the bridal chamber steeped in deadly silence. The two beggars turned to me, baring their teeth in ugly grins, eyes full of filth. One spoke in a sleazy tone. "Little lady, be good and it won't hurt. The more you struggle, the more fun we'll have." I laughed coldly, my sharp gaze sweeping over the two wretches before me. My voice was calm and emotionless. "It seems you two are quite experienced." The first one burst into mocking laughter. "Of course we are. We've handled plenty of high and mighty young misses like you. His Highness is always merciful. Whenever he meets a stubborn one, he lets us break her in first. In the end, none of them can keep up their lofty act." The second immediately chimed in, his tone oily. "Woman like you. Doesn't matter if you're a precious daughter of a noble house. You're still just toys for us to play with." Not one of the previous ones dared utter a single complaint. I smiled faintly, my eyes as cold as frost, my voice carrying a trace of killing intent. "Aren't you afraid of dying?" The two men froze for a split second, then roared with arrogant laughter. "With His Highness backing us, who would dare touch us?" I narrowed my eyes, my voice drifting lightly yet slicing like a blade. The words had barely left my lips when I took a powerful step forward. My body shot forward like lightning, my leg clamped around one man's neck, my calf muscles tightening with crushing force. Crack. The sound of a broken neck rang out crisp and final. The beggar's eyes bulged, his body convulsing for an instant before he crumpled like a puppet with its strings cut. The remaining man staggered back, face ashen, eyes wide with horror. "Why, you can't kill me. His Highness will never forgive you." I pulled the golden hairpin from my hair. The metal glinted in the candlelight. In a flash, the hairpin drove straight into his temple. Ah! The scream had only just begun when it was cut short. He collapsed heavily to the floor, blood gushing from his temple and soaking the ground. The thick metallic scent of blood filled the air. I merely lowered my head and dusted my hands as if I had just brushed away a speck of dirt. In the space of 3 breaths, the two wretches had become two lifeless corpses at my feet. Outside the window, the lively laughter and chatter of the wedding guests continued without pause. No one knew that inside this room, a cold-blooded massacre had just taken place. I gazed down at the two bodies, a flicker of icy killing intent passing through my eyes, like the lingering taste of blood on my tongue. Eliminating Pei Xiao had become urgent, but he was the heir of the Prince of Pingnan's household, a man of noble status. He was surely surrounded by hidden guards at all times. With my skills, assassinating him would not be difficult, yet the risk was far too great. If I succeeded, the consequences would be like pouring oil on a fire. The entire Prince of Pingnan's household would mobilize to hunt me down, and not only me. The entire Marquis's household would be dragged into the disaster. I now held the legitimate identity of the Marquis's daughter. I could not allow this to harm them. The safest path was not merely killing Pei Xiao alone, but erasing the entire Prince of Pingnan's household from existence. Moreover, I had to borrow someone else's hand to do it. Only then would I remain hidden and the Marquis's household stay protected. Yet that very requirement made the plan far more difficult. Every step would need meticulous calculation. I quickly weighed my strategies in my mind while already moving. I opened the window, took advantage of the silent night, and dragged the two corpses to the lotus pond in the rear courtyard. The darkness was thick, the pale moonlight on the water making the place even more eerie. I tied stones to their bodies and threw them in without hesitation. Ripples spread across the surface for a moment before the pond returned to perfect stillness, as if nothing had ever happened. Once finished, I brushed off my hands lightly and let a faint, curious smile curve my lips. I wonder what little drama Pei Xiao had planned to humiliate me in front of the guests. What sort of show is he preparing? At the thought, I curled my lips into a cold smile. My figure slipped through the corridors like a ghost. With a few light leaps, I appeared at the front courtyard, standing high above to observe everything below, my eyes sharp as blades as I searched. The banquet in the front courtyard was already winding down, but the atmosphere remained lively. The guests clustered around Pei Xiao, each one stepping forward to offer him wine and shower him with endless flattery. Pei Xiao's face was flushed with drink, yet the smug satisfaction on his features was even more obvious. He looked like a peacock spreading its tail, basking in the worshipful gazes around him. From time to time he glanced toward the bridal chamber, eyes gleaming with barely concealed excitement, as if eagerly awaiting a grand performance. When the time was right, I saw him wink at a maid waiting by the door. The maid immediately lowered her head and hurried into the crowd, her face a perfect mask of panic. "Something terrible has happened," she cried, her voice full of terror, drawing every eye in the room. The maid trembled as she spoke, carefully crafting an appearance of dread. "This servant just saw two men sneak into the princess consort's chamber. Strange sounds were coming from inside. They must be holding the princess consort captive. Your Highness, please hurry and see for yourself." Her every word was like oil poured on fire, seemingly worried, yet full of wicked implication that made everyone's imaginations run wild with filthy images. "You slut." Pei Xiao slammed his wine cup to the ground in rage. Porcelain shattered with a sharp crack. His face showed fury, but his eyes sparkled with triumph, as if victory were already in his grasp. "You dare to carry on with another man on your wedding night? This heir will personally drag you out and throw you into the river to feed the fish." He strode toward the bridal chamber like a judge about to pass sentence. The guests behind him followed eagerly, eyes bright with curiosity. Clearly they had no intention of stopping anything, they only wanted to watch the show. I smiled faintly, the corner of my mouth lifting in quiet mockery. Pei Xiao's scheme was so clumsy it was almost laughable, yet these people cared nothing for the truth. Or perhaps it was precisely because it was so fake that they looked forward to it even more. I slipped back into the chamber silently, sat down on the bed, and stared at the flickering candlelight, waiting for the play to begin. From afar, Pei Xiao's furious shouts already echoed closer. "Song Yun, you loose woman, you dared to commit such filth on your wedding night. Today this heir will punish you personally. Tomorrow I will go before His Majesty and submit a memorial. Let's see if Songzhao still has any face left to show the world. From now on, the Song household will have no place left in the capital. You will be utterly disgraced, mocked by the entire world for generations." Footsteps thundered closer. The doors were kicked open with a bang. Pei Xiao stormed in, sword in hand, looking like an executioner savoring his triumph. Behind him the guests crowded at the entrance, every face alight with excitement. I rose slowly, my gaze sweeping calmly over the intruders. Amid the chaos I remained perfectly composed, even offering a gentle smile. It is our wedding day, yet my husband comes charging in with a sword, shouting and making a scene. What exactly are you trying to do? Seeing only me sitting calmly on the bed, the triumphant grin on Pei Xiao's face froze solid. His cold eyes raked every corner of the room, but he found none of the scene he had expected. "Impossible," he muttered. He tore through the room like a madman, wardrobes, under the bed, yet found no trace of a second person. The more he searched, the more rage and disappointment flooded his eyes. Finally he spun around and glared at me, roaring like thunder. "Song Yun, where have you hidden him?" I smiled faintly, my eyes serene as I faced his fury. "Has my husband had too much to drink? There is no one else in this room." My light, gentle words made the veins on his forehead throb. Yet I continued, my tone as casual as if I were recounting an ordinary day. "The Prince of Pingnan's residence is heavily guarded. If a stranger had broken in, wouldn't he have already been killed as an assassin? My husband, are you really believing baseless rumors? Thinking that I would commit adultery with another man on our wedding night? If anyone were truly foolish enough to try such a thing, only an idiot would believe it." The moment I finished, soft chuckles rose throughout the room. The guests crowded at the door exchanged knowing glances, their eyes on Pei Xiao now full of ridicule. My short, simple words had sliced through his clumsy little drama like a sharp blade, turning the playwright into the clown. Pei Xiao's face darkened until it was nearly black. His fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. His eyes looked ready to set me ablaze on the spot. The atmosphere in the chamber grew so thick it was hard to breathe. One spark and his rage would explode. At that exact moment, a deep, authoritative voice rang out from behind the crowd. "It's nothing but a misunderstanding. Nothing but a misunderstanding." The instant the voice sounded, Pei Xiao's whole body trembled. Fear flashed in his eyes, and the aggression he had shown earlier vanished completely. I looked curiously toward the door and saw a middle-aged man with a square, imposing face stride in with steady, powerful steps. Behind him followed a beautiful woman whose eyes carried worry, yet she did not dare step forward, clearly afraid of the man in front of her. The guests immediately bowed in respect. "We greet your highness the prince and the princess consort." With one glance, I understood their identities. These were none other than the Prince of Pingnan and his consort, Pei Xiao's parents. Without a word of warning, the Prince of Pingnan stepped forward and delivered a resounding slap across Pei Xiao's face. The crisp sound left the entire room deathly silent. Blood trickled from the corner of Pei Xiao's mouth, yet he did not dare resist. He merely lowered his head in silence, accepting the punishment. The princess consort rushed forward at once, eyes filled with distress as she looked at her son. "Your Highness, why are you doing this? Can't we talk calmly?" The Prince of Pingnan ignored her completely. His sharp gaze swept across the crowd before he cupped his hands and spoke. "My worthless son drank too much and caused a disturbance. On his behalf, this prince apologizes to all of you. Today is a joyous day for the Prince of Pingnan's household. This prince hopes no baseless rumors will spread outside these walls. I repay kindness with kindness and repay grudges with grudges. Anyone who helps preserve the face of the Prince of Pingnan's household is a friend of mine. Anyone who dares speak nonsense behind our backs, this prince will never forgive." The moment his words ended, his cold gaze swept over the guests once more, and no one dared utter a sound. The prince is the emperor's own younger brother. Who would dare offend him? Everyone immediately bowed and promised. "Your Highness may rest assured. We will not breathe a single word." With the Prince of Pingnan's authority suppressing them, the guests quickly dispersed and left the courtyard. I watched their retreating figures and frowned slightly. In my heart I noted with caution this man was no ordinary opponent. With just a few sentences he had resolved the entire unfavorable situation, and even preserved the dignity of his household. I had intended to provoke Pei Xiao into making a bigger scene, so the Prince of Pingnan's household would lose all face, yet the prince had effortlessly dismantled the plan. Once everyone had left, the prince turned back. His icy gaze fell on me like a blade. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Song Zhao has indeed raised a clever daughter full of schemes. But remember this well, once you have entered the Prince of Pingnan's household, you had better put away those little tricks of yours. This prince does not tolerate even a grain of sand in his eye. If you dare cause trouble again, do not blame this prince for being ruthless." He paused, his eyes deepening. His tone grew even darker. "Do not think Song Zhao can protect you. That old fool doesn't know when to yield. Sooner or later he will bring disaster upon himself." I observed him silently, a thread of wariness rising within me. It was clear the Prince of Pingnan already intended to deal with the Marquis. He turned to Pei Xiao, his voice full of rebuke. "As for you, you can't even handle such a trivial matter properly." Pei Xiao kept his head lowered, his voice strained. "Your son is useless." Seeing that he did not dare talk back, the Prince of Pingnan gave a slight nod, turned, and left. His back was ramrod straight, his presence terrifyingly majestic. The princess consort stepped forward, eyes brimming with heartache. She gently admonished Pei Xiao while ordering servants to bring medicine for the wound on his face. Once that was done, she turned to me. Her gaze was cold and filled with disgust. "Causing waves the moment you step through the door. Truly, you have no manners at all. Your Marquis's household claims to be from a distinguished family, yet you raised a daughter this arrogant and disrespectful to her husband. How ridiculous." She shot me one final cold glance, then called out, "Nanny Huang, starting tomorrow, teach this princess consort proper etiquette. If she needs a firm hand, feel free to use the rod. Those who do not know the rules must be taught with the whip." From the crowd, a thin old woman stepped forward and bowed respectfully. This old servant obeys. The princess consort happily took Pei Xiao's arm and left, abandoning me alone in cold bridal chamber. Nanny Huang glanced at me, her eyes brimming with contempt and superiority. Princess consort, rest well. Tomorrow this old servant will teach you what the rules are, and conveniently rid you of that spoiled little miss attitude of yours. With that, she snorted coldly and led the others out, her posture radiating triumph as if she had just asserted her authority. The play had reached its conclusion for now, yet I knew this was only the opening act. The real storms were still waiting ahead. Once everyone had gone, I called Kui Yun inside. She still had not recovered from the earlier events. Her face was pale, her hands shaking as she helped me change out of the wedding robes. I gently told her to rest first and give her fragile heart a moment of peace. When night had fully descended, and I was certain Pei Xiao would not return, I quietly changed into dark night clothes and slipped out of the room. The darkness became my companion once more. Today was the wedding feast. Many guests had drunk themselves into a stupor and lay unconscious. This was the perfect opportunity to scout the Prince of Pingnan's residence. Before arriving, I had already memorized every path and corner of this estate. Every corridor, every hidden nook was as clear in my mind as a living map. My first destination was the courtyard belonging to the Prince of Pingnan and his consort. Concealing myself in the shadows, I moved lightly between the trees until I reached a concealed spot beside the window. I listened carefully, and every word spoken inside reached my ears as clearly as if carved in stone. The consort's voice was cold and filled with resentment. Your Highness, today Song Yun was far too insolent. Why did you agree to let the emperor issue the marriage decree and force our Xiaoer to wed such a woman? That father and daughter pair from the Song family has repeatedly humiliated us. We cannot let this matter rest. I frowned slightly, my eyes sharpening. The Prince of Pingnan spoke, his voice as cold as winter ice. That old fool Song Zhao dared to impeach this prince. Did he really think he could do so without preparing to lose his life? I used the marriage decree as an excuse to temporarily calm the situation. But in truth it was to distract both him and the emperor. He paused, his voice growing even darker. I have already ordered several trusted officials to gather evidence of Song Zhao's crimes. Once we have enough proof, I will immediately submit a memorial to impeach him before the court. At that time, the Song household will not only lose face, they will face the extermination of their entire clan. The princess consort immediately spoke, unable to hide the delight in her voice. Your Highness is truly wise and mighty. The Prince of Pingnan gave a low snort and continued. As for Xiaoer, tell him to behave himself. Recently, have him clean up the women in the secret chamber. Do not let the matter leak, or he will only invite more trouble for himself. I raised an eyebrow. The two words, secret chamber, lit up in my mind like a flame. The princess consort spoke with a choked, indignant tone. Xiaoer was simply in a bad mood and acted on impulse. His body has its flaws. How can we as parents blame him? He only wanted to vent a little anger. It's not as if he committed some grave sin. Your Highness, there is no need to be so harsh with him. The Prince of Pingnan's voice softened slightly. Soft words of cunt drifted from the room as he soothed the consort, yet the coldness in every syllable remained unmistakable. I slipped away silently. Every word I had just heard sank into my mind like a sharp blade. The Prince of Pingnan was plotting against the Marquis, and that secret chamber was clearly no ordinary place. This storm was truly only the beginning. I leaped lightly, my figure flashing through the darkness. With a few quick bounds, I arrived at Pei Xiao's courtyard. The Prince of Pingnan's words about the secret chamber still echoed in my mind, refusing to fade. With years of experience as an assassin, I had seen countless secret chambers, from the simple to the elaborate. If this one held women, it was most likely hidden in the most private part of the owner's bedchamber. Without hesitation, I slipped in Pei Xiao's bedroom through the window, choosing the moment when the guard's vigilance had lapsed. Pale moonlight filtered through the window, illuminating a messy room, but the anomaly was impossible to miss. In the center of the room, a bookshelf had been pushed aside, revealing a dark hidden door like the mouth of an abyss. Clearly, someone had just entered, and that someone was undoubtedly Pei Xiao. Without a second thought, I slipped through the door. A thick, nauseating stench of blood assaulted my nose, so pungent I had to hold my breath. Under the flickering torchlight on the walls, I followed the cold stone passage, carefully venturing deeper. Pei Xiao's furious shouts echoed from ahead, his voice filled with rage as he berated someone. I crept around a corner, and the scene inside the secret chamber made me stop in my tracks. Even though I had faced countless life and death situations and witnessed endless brutality, this sight still made me draw in a sharp breath. The scene before me far exceeded my imagination. Blood stained the stone floor red, limp bodies scattered everywhere, faces pale and eyes vacant. Some were still alive but trembled in terror, their bodies covered in bruises and wounds. I clenched my fists so tightly my knuckles cracked, my entire body tensing as every nerve screamed to rush forward and snap that beast's neck on the spot. But I held back. This wasn't the time for him to pay. In the dim secret chamber, the air was heavy. The flickering torchlight cast shadows on torture devices hanging everywhere. Cold iron hooks still crusted with dried blood, branding irons that had cooled but bore scorch marks, and walls studded with sharp needles of every size. The sight was a living hell designed solely to torment and crush the human spirit. In the middle of the room, more than 10 young women were bound tightly, completely naked. Some hung suspended from the ceiling by ropes, others were pressed against rough wooden pillars. The worst was the girl on the wooden torture horse. Her body shuddered, blood dripping from her lower body onto the cold stone floor in a long, spreading trail of red. The metallic stench rose, turning the stomach. Her agonized cries tore through the night. Pei Xiao stood right in front of the wooden horse, eyes blazing with madness, his face twisted in a grin of frenzied excitement. He laughed loudly, a savage sound like the cackle of a demon that sent chills down the spine. I stood motionless in the shadows, my cold gaze fixed on him, my hand clenched until my joints cracked. But I still restrained myself. This wasn't the moment to act. The clothes of these girls, though torn to shreds, still showed signs of luxury in their fine fabrics. Delicate hairpins still glittered faintly in the torchlight on their hair. Clearly, they couldn't be maids of the Prince of Pingnan's household. I recalled the words of the 2 beggars earlier that night. Pei Xiao had repeatedly ordered them to kidnap and violate noble young ladies. It was no surprise. These girls were likely daughters of prominent families in the capital. A bitter ache rose in my chest. This was the tragedy of women. No news of missing noble daughters had ever circulated in the capital. It proved their families had never dared report it to the authorities, nor search for them. They were afraid of ruined reputations, afraid of implicating their clans. In their hearts, they had probably resigned themselves to the idea that it was better for their daughters to die outside than return alive bearing such shame. The truly guilty were protected by the very cowardice and silence of those who should have defended these women. This silence only emboldened monsters like Pei Xiao, making them more arrogant and unhinged. Observing quietly, I saw 2 servants step forward, untying the 2 least injured girls and dragging them before Pei Xiao. He roughly pulled them into his arms, his hands like vises gripping their frail, lifeless bodies. The 2 girls looked as if they had died long ago, eyes vacant, bodies rigid, letting him abuse them like soulless dolls. Pei Xiao looked smug, his smile like that of someone who had just won a great victory. My cold gaze dropped to his lower body, and I immediately understood the princess consort's earlier mention of his bodily flaw. Pei Xiao was congenitally impotent, he could never truly be a man. That explained everything. His cruelty and lust were merely ways to mask his deep-seated insecurity. He couldn't touch women in the normal way, so he could only humiliate and torture them to compensate for his own shame. As for the Prince of Pingnan and his consort, their guilt over their son's defect had led them to indulge him without limit. That very indulgence had turned him into a cruel, twisted monster devoid of humanity. I left the secret chamber, my steps light as a ghost gliding through the night. My heart churned, but I forced myself to suppress the urge to rescue those women right then. Cruel as it sounded, if I took them away tonight, would they truly find peace? Those pale faces and empty eyes, even if they escaped, they would only face another tragic end. Their families, who valued reputation above life itself, would not seek justice for them. Instead, they would be forced to die in silence, like stains that needed covering up. A white silk noose over a beam, a vial of poison slipped in secret, or a sudden illness. It would all end in a single breath. I couldn't change their doomed fates, but what I could do was uproot the source of this disaster. Destroy Pei Xiao and the entire Prince of Pingnan's household. Every step I took that night, every image from the secret chamber burned like fire in my heart, hardening my resolve even more. I could not hesitate. I could not delay. The Prince of Pingnan had already begun plotting against the Marquis. Time was running out, and I would not let them succeed. Everything I had witnessed tonight, every small clue, had helped me devise a plan. Tomorrow, the show would begin. Early the next morning, just as Kyuyun finished helping me wash my face, the chamber door was shoved open with a harsh bang. Nanny Huang stormed in, leading a group of stern-faced matrons. Without any greeting or courtesy, she shot me a contemptuous glance, her voice icy. Princess Consort, this old servant has been ordered by the Princess Consort to teach you proper etiquette. The first rule is protocol. The Prince of Pingnan's household is imperial kin. Our rituals allow no mistakes. New lead Princess Consort, kneel and perform the full greeting to this old servant. With that, she leisurely took a ruler from one of the matrons beside her, her eyes brimming with mockery. She clearly believed I wouldn't dare resist. I merely smiled faintly, my gaze calm and unperturbed as I looked at her. Nanny Huang frowned, her tone turning even colder. Princess Consort, are you defying the order? A new bride daring to show disrespect to her elders. If word of this spreads, not only will you lose face, but the entire Song household will become the laughingstock of the world. Kyuyun stood to the side, her face pale with worry, hands clenched tightly. But I remained composed, the corner of my mouth lifting in a faint smile. My serenity only made Nanny Huang's face purple with rage. She pointed straight at me and bellowed, "Someone. The Princess Consort dares defy orders. Drag her to the ancestral hall to kneel and confess her crimes." Her finger hadn't even lowered when I moved like lightning, grabbing her wrist and snapping it with a gentle twist. Crack. The sound of breaking bone rang out crisp and clear. Nanny Huang let out a blood-curdling shriek, her face twisting in sudden agony. The surrounding matrons erupted in chaos, footsteps and panicked screams filling the room. I gave them a cold glance, then turned and pulled Kyuyun along as we walked out, paying no heed to the shrieks and hateful curses behind us. "You slut. How dare you do this to me? I'll have the heir deal with you. As long as I'm here, you can forget about living peacefully as Princess Consort. Just wait and see." I didn't bother turning back. I left the Prince of Pingnan's residence, hired a carriage, and headed straight to a discreet inn in the city. This morning's confrontation was merely an excuse. I needed to leave the prince's household to focus entirely on executing my plan. The news of me breaking Nanny Huang's arm, she who had been sent by the Princess Consort to teach etiquette, then leaving the residence of my own accord, spread through the capital like wildfire in the dry season. Pai Xiao wasted no time. He immediately sent word everywhere, ordering me to kneel before the gates of the prince's residence for 6 full hours to apologize. Otherwise, he would divorce and cast me out. The capital boiled over. Everyone was gossiping nonstop, eager for the next act in the drama. They all speculated wildly, waiting for the moment I would bow my head in humiliation. Not long after, the Marquis and his madam personally came to the inn to find me. Fury was written clearly on both their faces, their hands trembling with anger. The Marquis declared he would demand justice for me, but I only smiled and gently shook my head, refusing the offer. "In 3 days, I will return to the Song household myself," I said, my eyes filled with determination. Seeing I had made up my mind, the Marquis and Madame reluctantly agreed. That evening, the young miss sneaked over to see me. She wept uncontrollably, tears falling like rain, her choked sobs tearing at the heart. "Lu Yun. No, Yun, how can you endure such humiliation? Just divorce him. Father, mother, and I will support you. You can find a better match." Looking at her haggard appearance, a rare warmth rose in my chest. This family truly consisted of kind-hearted people who protected me with all their hearts. That was precisely why I could never forgive what the Prince of Pingnan's household had done. When night fell and the capital sank into silence, I quietly donned my night clothes. With the bundle I had prepared in advance, I left the inn. My footsteps blended into the deep darkness like an invisible cold wind. Tonight, my plan would officially begin. I slipped into the Prince of Pingnan's residence like a ghost, navigating the familiar paths with practiced ease, heading straight for Pei Xiao's secret chamber. No guards were posted, and the only sounds were the faint, muffled sobs of the imprisoned girls echoing in the oppressive gloom. Those cries sliced into my heart like knives, but I didn't stop. My resolve had been set long ago. This wasn't the time to save them. Quickly, I hid the prepared bundle in a concealed corner of the secret chamber, ensuring it wouldn't be easily discovered. I left the place immediately, the heavy air and despair of those fragile souls behind me. I waited until midnight, when moonlight bathed the quiet sky and the patrolling guards began to doze off. I returned silently. This time, it was the Prince of Pingnan's study. The spacious room felt cold, candlelight flickering and making shadows dance on the walls. I searched swiftly, but aside from a few routine documents and dusty books, there was nothing of value. From my robes, I withdrew several letters I had prepared beforehand and carefully tucked them between the books on the shelf. The position I chose was perfect, guaranteed to be found during any search. Once done, I closed the study door and left the Prince of Pingnan's residence without a sound, heading straight for Princess Changping's estate. The name Princess Changping rang like a bell, stirring memories of a figure the capital had nearly forgotten. She was the emperor's most beloved daughter. 3 years ago, her husband had died in battle while suppressing bandits. Since then, she had secluded herself in her residence, living quietly and never venturing out. The emperor, filled with guilt and sorrow, doted on her even more, treating her as more important than the crown prince himself. Though the capital rarely mentioned Princess Changping anymore, I knew she was still a force that could not be ignored. In this situation, only she had the power to stir up real trouble. Only she, with her noble status and the emperor's absolute protection, would fear nothing from the Prince of Pingnan's authority. Tonight, I sought her out because she was the most crucial piece on the chessboard I was about to flip. Princess Changping's residence was vast, but the guards were not particularly strict. Under cover of night, I silently wove through the quiet corridors and reached the outside of her bedchamber. I pushed open the window lightly and slipped inside, moving decisively straight to the princess's bed. I made no effort to hide my presence. In fact, I wanted to make a scene. Sure enough, the princess woke with a start, her eyes flashing with alarm. In an instant, she screamed, "Guards! Assassin!" Before she could say more, I struck the back of her neck with a chop. The princess immediately fainted, her body going limp onto the bed. Outside, hurried footsteps thundered and guards' shouts filled the air. I knew they were rushing toward the bedchamber. I quickly hoisted the princess onto my back and leaped out the window, vanishing into the night. The guards pursued behind, their cries growing louder, turning the entire princess's estate into chaos. Using the darkness and my familiarity with the paths, I led the chasing soldiers all the way to the gates of the Prince of Pingnan's residence. To ensure they wouldn't lose the trail, I tore off a piece of the princess's nightgown and tossed it right in front of the gates. Then I vaulted over the wall like a ghost. I glided swiftly through the dim corridors, heading straight for the secret chamber. The door burst open, revealing the gloomy interior. The imprisoned girls shrank back in fear when they saw me, their eyes filled with terror and despair. Upon spotting the princess tied to my back, pity flickered in their gazes. They must have taken me for one of Pei Xiao's loyal henchmen. I set the princess down and quickly bound her, my movements neat and decisive. Then I turned to the girls, my eyes cold as ice, my voice low and menacing. "Anyone who dares ruin the heir's good plans, you will pay with your worthless lives." My words cut like a blade, terrifying them further. No one dared speak, they simply huddled in the dark corners, trembling. Once finished, I turned to leave. Just before stepping through the doorway, I pulled a silver needle from my sleeve and stabbed it into the princess with lightning speed. She frowned slightly, her breathing growing rapid. A clear sign she would soon wake. Everything was perfectly arranged. An irreversible grand drama was about to begin. I exited the secret chamber. Outside, the air was already thick with roaring shouts. Guards from the princess's estate and the Prince of Pingnan's household were clashing fiercely, arguments blending with thundering footsteps, turning that corner of the city into boiling chaos. The Prince of Pingnan hurried to the front courtyard. When he heard the princess's guards report that she had been kidnapped, his face darkened instantly. His eyes flashed with the tension of a cornered beast. He was clearly weighing his options. Though he was imperial kin, the Prince of Pingnan's household had never been clean. If he let the princess's people search the premises, who knew how many filthy secrets would be exposed? Seeing the hesitation in his eyes, I knew the moment had come. Without hesitation, I stood right at the secret chamber's entrance and screamed at the top of my lungs, full of panic. "Help! Someone help!" The cry echoed throughout the Prince of Pingnan's residence like a blade slicing through the last thread of restraint. The instant the sound rang out, I silently melted into the shadows and quickly withdrew from the scene. The front courtyard immediately descended into utter pandemonium. The princess's guards, already frantic over her safety, heard the cries for help and grew even more desperate. Ignoring all orders, they charged straight inside, pushing everything to the point of no return. From this moment on, I knew I no longer needed to lift a finger. The rest would be handled by others. I left the Prince of Pingnan's residence and returned to the inn. Pale moonlight shone on the tea table where I sat calmly, quietly awaiting news. The next morning, the entire capital erupted like a storm. From main streets to back alleys, excited chatter filled the air. Kuyun burst into my room, face deathly pale. "Young miss, the entire Prince of Pingnan's household has been arrested. They say they kidnapped Princess Changping and hid dragon robes, plotting rebellion. In the Prince of Pingnan's study, they even found secret letters exchanged with Western Liang." The emperor was so furious his face turned livid and ordered a thorough investigation. "Young miss, what should we do? Will we be implicated?" Seeing her panicked expression, I smiled gently and reassured her softly. "It's fine. If we were going to be implicated, someone would have come to arrest us by now. But right now, no one dares touch either of us. I only just married into the prince's household 2 days ago, and this was a marriage personally decreed by the emperor himself. Who would dare lay a hand on me? That would be a direct slap to the emperor's face. He won't let anyone imply he chose the wrong person, so rest easy." Hearing this, Kiyun gradually calmed, her tension easing. Less than 1 watch later, news poured in nonstop. It turned out that among the women imprisoned in Pei Xiao's secret chamber were quite a few daughters of officials and wealthy merchants. The revelation hit the capital like a bomb. The families who had tried so hard to cover it up could no longer stay silent. They were forced to submit memorials to the emperor, demanding severe punishment for the Prince of Pingnan's household to protect their own reputations. At first, out of fear for their family's honor, they had hesitated to speak. But once the scandal broke, they weighed the pros and cons. Standing up to impeach the Prince of Pingnan's household not only protected their own families but also earned them a reputation for bravely defying the powerful. Leading the charge was none other than Princess Changping herself. Having personally witnessed the horrors in the secret chamber, she led those girls to kneel before the palace gates, pleading with the emperor to punish the Prince of Pingnan's household severely. The matter shook the capital with nonstop discussion. Yet for the emperor, though shocking, it still wasn't enough to completely topple the Prince of Pingnan's household. What truly enraged him were the discoveries in the secret chamber: dragon robes and a counterfeit imperial seal. These were clear evidence that a rebellion plot had already begun. The emperor immediately ordered a full investigation of the Prince of Pingnan's household. The prince's study was searched, and the letters exchanged with Western Liang were found. Irrefutable proof of colluding with the enemy. The emperor's fury exploded beyond control. He issued an edict to arrest everyone in the Prince of Pingnan's household and hand them over to the Imperio clan court for trial. After years of soaring power, the Prince of Pingnan's household finally collapsed in a single night. On the 3rd day, I walked to the gates of the heavenly prison, casually slipping a pouch of silver to the jailer. The gatekeeper asked no questions and quickly led me deep into the damp, gloomy depths where those who had once stood arrogantly at the pinnacle of power were now held. We stopped before the cell holding the Prince of Pingnan and his family. Pei Xiao cowered in the corner, head bowed, his whole body shaking like someone who had lost all will. The princess consort leaned against the wall, her eyes vacant and exhausted. The Prince of Pingnan sat upright in the middle of the cramped cell, his demeanor still calm and confident, as if none of the outside events concerned him. My footsteps echoed on the cold stone floor, shattering the heavy silence. All 3 turned their heads at once, each with a different expression in their eyes. The Prince of Pingnan merely glanced at me before closing his eyes again, looking completely unconcerned, as if I were beneath his notice. In contrast, the moment Pei Xiao saw me, he sprang up, eyes blazing with hatred, and snarled, "You slut! Where have you been hiding these past few days? How dare you abandon this heir here?" The princess consort made no effort to hide her contempt, her gaze as cold as a knife. "What are you standing there for? Hurry and attend to your husband. He hasn't been well these days. Give him a massage." I didn't respond. My cold eyes swept over the 3 before me. A chill wind blew through the iron bars, carrying a bone-piercing cold that made the atmosphere even gloomier. I ignored the venomous words of those 2 and calmly turned to the Prince of Pingnan, my gaze cool yet sharp. "Your Highness still maintains such composure. Do you already have a way out?" The Prince of Pingnan frowned slightly, a flicker of displeasure crossing his face, but he said nothing. He simply closed his eyes again, as if ignoring my existence. Before he could answer, Pei Xiao pointed at me aggressively, his voice full of arrogance. "You're blind. Don't you know who my father is? He is the Prince of Pingnan, the Emperor's own younger brother. The Emperor will definitely trust my father. Otherwise, why haven't we been tortured yet? This matter isn't as serious as you think." At that, he lifted his chin, brimming with confidence, as if victory were already his. I merely curved my lips, my eyes lingering on his smug face. How fitting that this entire family remains so arrogant. Looking straight at the Prince of Pingnan, I spoke slowly, my voice like a sharp blade. "Your Highness believes this is all a frame-up, that every piece of evidence has loopholes. You trust your loyal subordinates will find every way to save you, because they know that if you fall, they too will have no path left." At that, the Prince of Pingnan opened his eyes slightly, his cold gaze carrying a hint of arrogance. He curled his lip. "At least you're not completely ignorant." Pei Xiao snorted coldly, his voice dripping with disdain. "Those hunting dogs, other than biting for their master, what use are they?" I smiled faintly, my icy eyes settling on Pei Xiao's face. "Your Highness, today the Emperor has already issued the decree. At noon tomorrow, the entire Prince of Pingnan's household will be executed by beheading." The moment the words left my lips, the cell fell into deathly silence. All three stared at me, faces full of disbelief. Impossible. The Prince of Pingnan reacted first. He shot to his feet, roaring in fury, eyes bloodshot as if he wanted to devour me. "You're lying. Don't think you can scare me." The princess consort shrieked and lunged at me madly, hand raised to strike. I looked at her coldly, showing no mercy as I delivered a powerful kick. Thud! The sound of her body slamming into the wall rang out harshly. The princess consort collapsed, writhing pain, unable to move. Pei Xiao hesitated, about to charge, but upon seeing that, he froze. Fear flashed in his eyes, his feet rooted to the spot as if nailed down. He didn't dare take another step. I advanced slowly, staring directly at the Prince of Pingnan, my voice low like pouring drops of ice into their hearts. Today at court, all the civil and military officials unanimously submitted memorials demanding that Your Highness be severely punished. The Imperial Clan Court has also presented complete evidence of your faction, building and rebellion plot, along with Pei Xiao's crimes of murdering innocent civilians. The Emperor has decreed that at noon tomorrow, the entire Prince of Pingnan's household will be executed by beheading. The Prince of Pingnan's face turned deathly pale. His lips trembled as if he wanted to speak but couldn't form the words. I tilted my head slightly, curling my lips in a faint smile. "Oh, and one more thing I almost forgot. After your arrest, I had the heir send letters to all your subordinates. In them, I called them useless hunting dogs and ordered them to pour every effort into saving you. I also made sure to mention that if they failed, you would expose all their weaknesses so you could all go to hell together." These words struck like a fatal blow. The Prince of Pingnan's face drained of all color, his eyes widening as his former arrogance dissolved into terror and despair. The princess consort lay on the ground, chest heaving violently, muttering nonstop, "Impossible, impossible." As for Pei Xiao, he stood frozen, eyes filled with confusion and collapse. I stood there, my cold gaze sweeping over the three-cornered figures. Not a ripple stirred in my heart. This ending was one they had chosen for themselves long ago. Today was simply the final act of a tragedy already written. If before, the prince's subordinates had still held some intention of rescuing him, then after receiving my letters, every single one of them would now pray for him and Pei Xiao to die in prison. They had only ever been willing lackeys, but when insulted to this degree, their resentment burned like oil poured on fire. I hadn't just used contemptuous words to humiliate them. I had deliberately added a sentence to drive them into panic. If they didn't save him, the Prince of Pingnan would drag all their weaknesses into the light, so they could all go to hell together. That threat was enough to make them unwilling to let such a dangerous man live. The longer he survived, the more it would be like hanging their own necks on someone else's blade. Even if the Emperor harbored the slightest doubt about the rebellion, did it truly matter? A ruler's heart is unfathomable. Staying close to the throne is like sleeping beside a tiger. For members of the imperial clan, even the faintest hint of treason was enough to warrant complete eradication. No roots left to sprout future trouble, especially for an emperor known for his cold decisiveness. Pei Xiao ground his teeth, his face twisting with rage as he roared, "You vicious bitch! No one is more ruthless than you. I turned back at a leisurely pace, offering a faint, icy smile, my voice light as if discussing the weather. I forgot to mention. I also prepared a little gift especially for you. The moment the words left my lips, 2 jailers standing nearby stepped forward, seized Pei Xiao, and dragged him roughly out of the cell. He thrashed in panic, eyes darting wildly, about to demand an explanation when the door to the adjacent cell swung open. Several beggars staggered in, their ragged, filthy figures reeking of decay. Pei Xiao's face turned deathly pale in an instant, his eyes bulging with raw horror as if he were staring at the god of death himself. I curved my lips, my voice gentle yet chilling. These are a few friends I specially invited. They've never known the touch of a woman in their lives. But I figure, man or woman, it makes no difference to them. You should consider it an honor. Your Highness the heir. The beggars grinned in delight, bowing gratefully to me before advancing on Pei Xiao, their eyes gleaming with greedy lust. The princess consort lunged forward in panic, clutching the iron bars and screaming until her voice cracked. Stop. What are you doing? Stop right now. Don't touch my son. I paid her frantic cries no mind, merely glancing over indifferently. Just giving him a taste of his own medicine. The Prince of Pingnan ground his teeth, eyes bloodshot as if he wanted to tear me apart piece by piece. He roared in helpless fury, "You animal! How dare you do this to my family? You're digging your own grave." I simply chuckled softly, my voice cold. I don't care about life or death. The question is whether you can endure it. The beggars had already pounced, pinning Pei Xiao down. He struggled wildly, his screams echoing with pure despair. "No. Stay away. Get out. Do you know who I am? I am the heir of the Prince of Pingnan. I'll have you all killed." I turned my back, offering no further attention, and tossed over my shoulder, "Go easy on him. The heir is still a lofty phoenix, after all. Don't damage him too badly." But the words clearly fell on deaf ears. The drug had already taken hold. Pei Xiao's initial curses and howls reverberated through the dark prison, but they soon dissolved into broken, desperate whimpers. "Spare me, please. Spare me." Outside, the princess consort pounded the bars until her hands bled, tears streaming down her haggard face as she wailed, "Stop. I beg you, stop, please." The Prince of Pingnan also roared with impotent rage, his voice thick with helplessness. "You beast. You won't die a peaceful death." I turned my head, my eyes as cold as eternal ice, my voice slicing like a blade. "I may be a beast, but what about all of you? You raised a monster who violated countless girls, slaughtered countless lives, and trampled the honor of countless families. Now that he's tasting a fraction of that pain, you can't bear it. This is karma." Pei Xiao's agonized shrieks poured from the cell, mingling with the princess consort's heart-wrenching sobs to create an indescribably tragic scene. The Prince of Pingnan listened, his face ashen. Suddenly he spat out a mouthful of fresh blood, his whole body shaking as he pointed a trembling finger at me, unable to speak. I had seen enough. I turned away, pressed a silver ingot into the jailer's hand, and said coolly, "In a little while, a few more guests will arrive. Keep a close eye on them for me." The jailer accepted the silver with a beaming smile, bowing deeply. "Rest assured, miss, scum like this disgusts us more than we can say." I nodded lightly, never looking back as I left the heavenly prison. Behind me, Pei Xiao's blood-curdling screams and the princess consort's frenzied weeping continued to echo through the gloom like a funeral dirge, escorting the entire family to its end. In the 27th year of the Yongli reign, the Prince of Pingnan's household was convicted of treason. The entire clan was executed by beheading. The emperor showed mercy by granting princess consort Song Yun a divorce, and bestowed upon her the title of county princess as a reward for the suffering she had endured in the prince's residence. That same year, Song Yun left the capital and wandered the world, leaving no trace behind. The story ends here for now. If it touched your heart or left you thinking, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please like, subscribe, and share Raccoon Tale to help more stories come to life. See you in the next tale.